The door banged open, and the heavy cage rolled across the floor, the metal scraping against the tiles, sending a shiver down every spine in the room. The students froze mid-step, their eyes wide, and their breaths caught in their throats. Some clutched their friends, others pressed against the walls, whispering under their breaths about what could possibly be inside. The cage was enormous, taller than any desk and wider than the aisle. It moved like it had a life of its own, swaying slightly as if testing the boundaries of the room. A low growl rumbled from the depths of the cage, vibrating through the floor and into the students' feet. The sound was not constant, but it came in waves, a warning, a threat, or maybe a question. The shadows inside shifted, a massive shape rolled over, and a faint glint of eyes caught the light, piercing through the bars like fireflies on a dark night. The students gasped, some stumbled backward, bumping into desks and knocking over books, papers fluttering to the ground like frightened birds. The teacher tried to regain control, her voice shaky as she shouted instructions, but even her words sounded small and weak compared to the presence of the creature. The students stared, frozen between fear and fascination, unable to look away from the dark bulk that moved with impossible power and grace. The air felt thick, heavy with tension. Every heartbeat loud, every inhale sharp. The smell of the cage and the animal hit them, a mix of earth's sweat and something undefinable that made their stomachs churn and eyes water. In the middle of the chaos, one girl stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on the cage, not with fear but with something else, curiosity perhaps, understanding, or a strange recognition. She took a slow step forward, and the beast shifted its head in her direction. Eyes that glowed faintly in the shadows met hers, and for a moment the growling stopped. The room seemed to hush around them, as if the world had narrowed to the two of them alone. She felt the hairs on her arms rise, and a thrill of something unspoken coursed through her. The other students whispered behind her, some daring to peek over shoulders, others clinging to each other, but she did not move. She could feel the presence of the beast pressing out through the bars, as if it was aware of her heart, aware of her calm in the storm. She did not speak, did not flinch, she just stared, and the cage seemed to acknowledge her presence, swaying slightly in response as the growl faded into a low rumble like distant thunder. The shadows inside the cage shifted and stretched as the beast moved, its massive head from side to side, the faint glow of its eyes never leaving the girl in the center of the room. Its fur rippled like smoke over muscles that could crush desks with ease. The growl returned, softer now, a low rumble that seemed almost curious than threatening. The students pressed against the walls, their faces pale, some hiding behind hands, others staring wide-eyed, unable to look away from the creature that seemed larger than anything they had imagined. The girl took another step forward, her feet barely making a sound on the floor. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. She could feel something drawing her closer, the beast's gaze burning into her like a question waiting for an answer. She reached out her fingers toward the bars, just enough to let the creature see she was not afraid. The beast leaned its head slightly, tilting it as if examining her soul for truth or perhaps permission. Whispers spread through the room like a breeze through dry leaves. "This is crazy," some said. Others froze, unable to speak. The teacher took a shaky step forward but stopped when the beast lifted a paw and pressed it against the bars with surprising gentleness. The students held their breath at the contrast between its enormous size and the careful precision of its movement. The room seemed to shrink and expand, at the same time filled with the tension of expectation and the possibility of something extraordinary. For a moment nothing moved except for the slow rise and fall of the beast and the girl standing perfectly still, like two halves of a secret puzzle fitting together. The world outside the cage disappeared, the other students faded into the background, and the rumble of the beast's throat became a language. She instinctively understood it was not hunger or anger but longing, something primal and yet tender reaching out across the metal barrier. The beast's eyes glimmered and it pressed closer, its massive nose nearly touching the girl's hand. Its growl was gone, replaced by a soft rumble that vibrated through the air and into her chest. The connection was instant, unspoken, and undeniable. Panic erupted in the classroom like a storm breaking over calm waters. Some students screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over chairs and books. Their eyes were wide with terror and fascination. At the same time, the beast pressed its massive head closer to the girl, its warm breath brushing against her fingers, but the others could only see the danger and not the understanding that passed between them. The teacher shouted, her voice cracking as she tried to regain control, but the words were swallowed by the growls that rolled low in the cage and the pounding of students' hearts. The room felt smaller, tighter, the air thick with fear and anticipation. Every movement seemed magnified, every shuffle, every gasp echoing, like thunder in the enclosed space. Some students hid under desks. Others clung to friends, their knuckles white with grip, but one boy dared a step forward and froze at the sight of the beast, shifting its enormous body with a grace that was terrifying, yet mesmerizing. The metal bars rattled as it pressed against them, nudging toward the girl, like it recognized her as something different than the rest. The girl remained perfectly still, her eyes never leaving the glowing gaze of the creature. Her breath was calm, steady, and yet she could feel the electricity in the room vibrating through her body. The beast lowered its head slowly and let out a soft rumble. That was not a threat but a call, a signal that it trusted her alone among all the chaos. The other students stared in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the connection unfolding before them, as the cage trembled under the weight of something bigger than fear, something that could not be contained. The room seemed to shrink around the girl and the beast, as if the walls themselves were holding their breaths. The other students faded into shadows at the edges of her vision, leaving only the cage and the enormous creature that waited patiently with glowing eyes. The low rumble from its throat was steady like a heartbeat syncing with her own, and she felt a strange calm settle over her despite the chaos surrounding them. The beast tilted its head, studying her, as if it could read her thoughts, its massive body shifting slightly in the tight space, yet moving with careful precision that belied its size. She took another step forward, the boards creaking under her feet, but her eyes never left its gaze. She could feel something unspoken passing between them, a recognition, a silent agreement that bridged the fear and uncertainty filling the classroom. The students whispered among themselves, some daring to peek closer, while others pressed against walls or hid behind desks. Their voices trembled, caught between awe and terror, but the girl felt none of their panic. She could feel the warmth of the creature and the subtle tension in its muscles. The promise of trust and the fragility of its playth. Teacher tried to intervene, stepping forward, but the moment froze her in place. The beast shifted again, nudging its massive head against the bars, softer, this time not threatening, just seeking. She reached out her hand, slowly letting her fingers hover above its fur, and the room held its breath as if the world had stopped just to watch this fragile connection form between human and beast. The beast pressed closer to the bars, its massive paws brushing against the floor in slow, deliberate movements. Its eyes never left the girl, as if measuring her heart, her courage, and the space between fear and trust. She took another step forward, her hand reaching out until her fingers hovered just above the cold metal of the cage. The low rumble that vibrated from its chest changed, slightly softer, warmer, almost like a sigh. The other students watched frozen, some whispering in disbelief, others wide-eyed and silent. The teacher held her breath, unable to step closer. Without breaking the fragile moment unfolding in front of her, the girl felt a pull in her chest, stronger than fear, stronger than caution. The creature wanted her to understand. It wanted her to reach across the barrier. With trembling fingers she touched the cage, just lightly at first, and the beast leaned its massive head into her hand, slowly and carefully, letting her feel the heat and the weight and the undeniable longing in its eyes. The low rumble became a deep vibration that shook the floor and her bones, but it was not threatening. It was pleading. It was asking for trust and for freedom in a way no one else in the room could comprehend. The classroom held its breath. The world narrowed to the girl and the beast, the quietest, exchanged louder than any scream or warning or rule. The girl stood frozen for a heartbeat, letting the warmth of the beast seep through her fingers, its massive head pressing gently into her hand. The low rumble that vibrated from its chest felt like the pulse of something ancient and powerful that trusted her alone in a room full of fear. She could feel the subtle shifts in its muscles, the careful breathing, the restrained energy that could crush everything in its path, but chose not to. Because of her, the other students shuffled nervously, their whispers rising and falling like waves. Some dared to edge closer, peeking around desks and chairs to see the impossible bond forming between human and beast. Others pressed together wide-eyed, muttering about how it could kill them in a heartbeat. Yet it did not. The teacher shook her head, unsure whether to intervene or watch as the rules and safety of the classroom collided with something far larger than comprehension. The girl swallowed the lump in her throat and took another step forward, her hand still resting on the bars. The beast lowered its massive paw onto the cage floor, almost gently, almost like it was testing her patience, testing her courage. The rumble deepened, vibrating through the floor and the walls and her own chest. It was not a sound of threat, but a sound of recognition. It was a language without words, a plea without sound. Slowly, she pressed her hand against its paw, feeling the coarse fur, the heat, the strength that could break metal if it chose. She whispered, softly though no one could hear the words. The creature understood the intention, the calm, and the promise. It pressed against her hand, nudging, as if asking her to step closer to the impossible, to the unknown. She hesitated only for a moment and then leaned forward. Her heart pounding. The room seemed to shrink until it was only the cage, the beast, and the girl, alone in a world that had never existed before. The students stared, frozen, the air thick with tension and wonder. Their fear clashed with all their screams trapped in their throats as the beast and the girl shared a silent conversation, stronger than any rule or warning in the world. The teacher shouted warnings, but the girl did not flinch. She ignored the words, her eyes locked on the glowing gaze of the beast, and her hand remained pressed gently against its massive paw. The creature shifted slightly, its head tilting, as if acknowledging her defiance, a silent agreement passing between them that no one else could see. Other students froze, some whispering in disbelief, others pressing against walls, unable to look away. The air was thick with tension, the room vibrating with the silent power of the beast and the courage of the girl who had stepped beyond fear into the hush of the classroom. The low rumble of the creature became louder, resonating through the floor and into every chest. It was not a threat but a signal, a pulse that seemed to say, trust me, I know. Youth girl slowly leaned closer, letting her other hand hover above the cage bars, as if willing them to vanish. The beast nudged its massive head against her palm, pushing gently, pressing as if asking for release. It moved with a grace that contradicted its size and strength, like a shadow coiled around her courage, waiting for permission. The students watched in awe, the tension in the room so thick it could be cut with a knife. The teacher stepped forward, hesitated, unsure how to intervene. The beast's eyes glimmered a mix of longing and trust, and the girl whispered softly, though no words were heard, yet the meaning was clear. She would not turn back, she would not step away, and the cage seemed smaller, somehow powerless against the bond forming in the quiet storm of fear and wonder. Her fingers trembled as they gripped the cold metal of the cage, the lock glinting under the classroom lights. The beast pressed its massive head against her hand as if giving silent permission, a breathless moment suspended between fear and trust. She turned the key slowly, the click echoing like thunder through the stunned silence of the room. The cage door creaked as she pushed it open, the metal sliding aside to reveal the beast in all its immense glory. It stepped out carefully, each movement deliberate and precise, like a shadow made flesh circling her. Once it let out a soft rumble that vibrated through the floor, the desks, and every heart in the classroom. The students stared wide-eyed, mouths open, some frozen in place, others gripping each other, too afraid to move, yet unable to look away. The girl reached out her hand and the beast lowered its massive head, allowing her fingers to run along the coarse fur. She could feel its strength, warmth, and the deep pulse of life vibrating through her own body. The low rumble became a song of trust, a language older than fear, older than rules and warnings. The teacher swallowed hard, unsure whether to intervene or step back. The other students pressed together, some taking cautious steps forward, others backing away, too stunned to speak. The classroom was no longer just a room, it was a stage for something extraordinary, something that could not be contained or explained. The beast sat at her feet, its eyes glowing softly like embers, and the girl knelt beside it, hand resting gently on its head. The world outside the cage disappeared, the fear faded into awe, and the bond between them became a quiet thunder. Impossible to ignore. The classroom had never felt so small, so immense, and so alive, all at the same time. The classroom was silent except for the low rumble of the beast resting at her feet, its massive head tilted slightly, as if listening to the girl who knelt beside it, her fingers brushing along its coarse fur. The other students stared wide-eyed, their fear replaced by awe, and something like wonder they had never expected to feel. The world outside the cage no longer mattered, only the bond between human and creature filled the space. Slowly whispers spread through the room, some daring to step closer, some still frozen in disbelief, but all eyes remained fixed on the girl and the beast. They could see not a monster but a being capable of trust, of love, of something far beyond the rules of fear. The teacher lowered her arms, finally understanding that this moment was bigger than warnings, bigger than authority, bigger than anything she had ever encountered. The girl spoke softly, though no one heard the words, yet the beast understood and leaned into her hand, pressing its head against her shoulder. Its warm breath brushed against her cheek, and the low rumble vibrated through the floor, through the desks, through every heart in the classroom. The room was alive with a quiet magic, the kind that shifted everything in a single heartbeat. Students began to move carefully, their fear dissolving into fascination. They reached out hesitantly, some touching the edge of the cage, some brushing the fur under her guidance, but the beast remained, calm and gentle, never threatening, never withdrawing, only patient and aware of each small movement of trust. The girl looked around at the wide eyes and pale faces and realized the lesson was not about fear or danger. It was about courage, compassion, and the quiet power of connection. The classroom had changed forever. The cage was open and the beasts free, but the true freedom had been given to everyone who had witnessed the impossible bond and felt it echo deep inside their own hearts.